Hello there, you're watching CNN Money Switzerland with the main news headlines on Tuesday, the 26th of May. I'm Hannah Wise. Swiss watch exports collapsed more than 80% last month as coronavirus hit the industry hard. Production, sales, and distribution have all been impacted. The only place to buck that trend was in China. Olivia Chang has the story.
I think actually April, with the benefit of hindsight, will be seen as probably the worst month for the industry. We're in a period where, although China is coming back, it wasn't really back, firing on all cylinders. And in fact, in China, if you talk to the luxury goods guys, they tend to be saying that every day things are improving there in China, but still not back to quite where they were. But the rest of the world was pretty much in a lockdown. So, the figures, I must admit, I was expecting something around a decline of a half, something like that, maybe a little bit more. So it is quite shocking, more than 80%. And if you actually look at the top 10 markets, it's really been transformed. Combined, China and Hong Kong is, half of all exports. That's not a particularly healthy market. Previously, there were less than 20% combined. So, and if you look at some other big markets historically, they just seem to have totally dropped out of the list of the top 30. For example, Spain doesn't get a mention when historically it's always been a top 10 market. So, you can imagine it very, very difficult in many countries outside of China, and China wasn't back to its best.
In Europe, we are starting to see the first signs of shops opening up again. Also here in Switzerland, how much of a rebound could we be talking about here?
It's difficult to know because tourism is so important, and obviously people aren't traveling. But I've, like you, I've been up and down Bahnhofstrasse, and I've seen the queues outside the shops, the Dior, LVMH, Tiffany, etc., etc. So basically, you can see that there is demand from the locals, at least, to get back into the stores. I think in some cases they could be the returns. They could just be looking to see what there is because people have been, locked down at home for 8 weeks or so. In fact, I went into Bukhara, and the busiest part was a repair floor, as a lot of people were obviously in there trying to get watches repaired after everything was closed down for 8 weeks. But the locals, yes, they seem to have the appetite, but of course you miss the tourists, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, the Americans, other Europeans. And just looking at China as an example, they're saying that probably the domestic business is better than it was, but it's not enough to offset the lack of Chinese tourists in the rest of the world. So I think that's a big question mark. Domestically, demand potentially, tourism, we'll have to wait and see.
You just said you noticed some queues. I also saw them as well. And I wanted to ask you, does it surprise you seeing these lines? And how do you forecast the demand for luxury goods and this idea of something being Swiss made? What is that going to mean?
Yeah, I think part of it, the queue obviously is you're not allowed so many people in the shops, and in some ways there's a bit of a marketing ploy. If you walk past a Dior or an LVMH and you see 10, 20 people hanging around outside the store, obviously with the meter or 2 meters social distancing. But I was surprised, to be honest. Literally, I was there the first day of shops opening. It was about 2 weeks ago, and queues outside luxury goods stores, when there weren't necessarily outside normal shops. But some of that could be just due to the wealth of the Swiss population generally and the high per capita, the overall consumer. So, and then in terms of Swiss made, obviously the watch industry is going through a devastating experience currently. A lot of the factories were closed, at least temporarily, over the last month or so. Now we're hearing that Rolex, Audemars Piguet, Patek are all back in action. I think some of the Richemont brands and also the Swatch Group brands may be doing a little bit more. So it's going to be a very difficult year. I still think the Swiss watch industry will survive. But you've also seen, you've probably seen the Basel World cancellation. That event now is over. That was a 100-year plus event for the Swiss watch industry, specifically watches and jewelry. That is now finished. So COVID has certainly claimed a big victim there. But I think the industry overall will survive. Swissness is important in luxury goods, particularly in watches, as you know. But it's going to be a long time. I think it'll be a few years before we get back to 2019 levels.
John, before I let you go, your best and worst case scenario for watch exports overall in 2020?
Yeah, my official forecast at the moment is down 20%. After today's figure, I think it needs to be probably a lot worse. I'm thinking probably it's going to be around a 30% decline this year. There are a lot of questions about whether tourism will come back, and then we obviously have an economic recession. Typically, luxury doesn't do brilliantly when you have an economic recession. And that is the next stage of the crisis. The health crisis is coming to an end. We have the economic crisis. We're in the middle of it, and it will continue for a while. And probably eventually we'll have a financial crisis to actually try and pay down some of this debt we're all building up, well, the states are building up. And during that process, I can't believe it's going to be a fantastic environment for watches.
Well, meanwhile, the lockdown situation here and abroad has also impacted Swiss trade figures, which are out this Tuesday. Exports fell by 11.7%, while imports fell by 21.9% in April. In both directions, these are the largest monthly declines in decades. Swiss employment fell 0.1% in the first quarter of the year across the economy. That translates into 10,000 fewer jobs than in the same quarter last year. The employment outlook is also down on new data from the Federal Statistical Office. Now, it may not be surprising to find that office space occupancy fell to almost 0% during national lockdowns. That's a finding by a Swiss startup, Locati. The startup analyzes office utilization space and says it's unlikely to return to 100% even when the crisis is over. And that has some big implications.
For now, what we're seeing is that offices will be occupied to a maximum of 50 to 60% to their capacity, while people are getting used actually to doing home office and remote work and collaborating virtually. Companies will allow that more and more. So we've kind of had a big acceleration on all the activity-based working and digital initiatives in workplace management. So that will definitely impact then that once it's safer to come to the office. I still think that utilization levels will drop to lower than they were before, which gives corporate real estate managers, of course, the task to adapt the space program that they have to that new demand, and also to offer employees an environment they really do want to come back to. I'm pretty certain that people will not come back to an open plan office where they're sitting right next to 6 other people in a group of 8, because that's simply not attractive. And also we found it's not safe.
The habits have changed sustainably. And so this will, of course, increase the flexibility of the workforce, and therefore really our companies, our customers need to think about how they can adjust their real estate portfolio in terms of the new reality. What will the role of the office building be? Things are, they think about, okay, what is the value proposition? Why should companies like our employees actually come to the office? Why should we let them commute for an hour and then just to come to the office? So the value proposition of the building is changing, and our customers are really thinking about how can they actually adjust their buildings to this new value proposition, to the new flexibility which is here to stay.
Now, while nothing beats the buzz of a live sporting event, innovation and technology will change how we view sports in a post-coronavirus life. Matt Layton explores now those developments and looks at how even sponsorship may change in the future.
It's hard to comment as a whole for all the events that we manage. So you have to look at each sport property separately. Some have the option to postpone the event to a later date in the year or even to next year. That goes, for example, to the motocross Grand Prix events. And some other events had final cancellations. For example, the Ice Hockey World Championship, which would have started last Friday here in Switzerland, has been cancelled and will not be repeated this year. And there's a range of factors who have an influence on this decision. First of all, it's the COVID-19 situation in each specific country. It's the way how the government acts towards that. It's the room in the calendar that's left in the remaining part of the year, and it's the insurance situation for each different sport and many other factors.
On a financial point of view, can you put a figure on the different scenarios and who would be either paying or having a loss of income?
Well, the worst case obviously is if an event has been finally cancelled and will not be repeated. If an event is being postponed to another point in time in the year, then you have basically case-by-case renegotiations, both with the rights holder who owns the property and with the commercial partners. And that's each case is separate. What I can see is that there's much more flexibility at the moment on both sides, on the side of the rights holder and on the side of the commercial partners, to find good solutions.
What sort of vision and how do you see the market opening out in the next 3 to 6 months?
I think there is a wave of sports events that are now getting back. They will have a benefit because the fans are eagerly waiting, for sports to relaunch. And they will be the lucky ones who benefit from this effect. Then, if played without spectators, if events take place without spectators in the next months, there will again be those who are more creative or less creative. More creative means that you use all kinds of digital technologies to still engage the fan who will not be in the stadium, or other means will be to show more advertising by LED technologies or by means of virtual advertising. So again, there's many innovations which are now being tested on the market, which will partly compensate for the lack of spectators.
What lessons do you think we can learn from this? I mean, are we going to use different technologies? Are we going to have different pricing structures? What can we positively learn going forward?
I think first of all, nothing can replace the buzzing atmosphere of a real event, with audience on site. That will always remain in place. But then, in terms of learnings, I think this transition shows us now that there is a lot of things that can be done in terms of new ideas for fan engagement, mainly digital technologies, that can engage fans without being present in the stadium. And I think the way how you work together with your partners will be partly redefined. The contracts in the future, they will include terms how to deal exactly with postponements, cancellations of events. There will be such clauses. Will also have an impact on how insurance companies probably treat such cancellations. And lastly, I think there will be, as always, some companies, some categories will get out stronger of such a transition period. Those companies that maybe benefit from the crisis. Again, mostly companies which work in the digital online sphere, that make additional business in these times. They will also be stronger in the future, I think.
And just to wrap up, here's some footage from the New York Stock Exchange, which reopened today after a 2-month hiatus to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. The New York Governor, Andrew Cuomo, rang the opening bell today, but traders are returning to a number of new safety measures, including reminder signs, footprint stickers to keep people apart, and of course, hand sanitizer. That's you all up to date now this Tuesday. Just remember, you can catch everything online. Check out our website at cnnmoney.ch and follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Bye-bye.